Before I start today, as y'all come, so before I start, I need to go ahead and identify the English teachers in the audience. English teachers? None, really? One? Okay, if you're an English teacher, you'll have to forgive the grammar of the main thing today, okay? I know it's wrong. I know it's a double negative. But it's the way it comes to me, all right? So today, here's what we're talking about. If y'all go ahead and switch me over, Debbie. You go ahead and swap over. Here we go. Cannot not. Have you ever had one of those moments where you felt like, I cannot not do this, or say this, or whatever? Imagine you all have. You've all had these times where it just became impossible for you not to do something. Sometimes it's even though you know it might not be wise. Even though it doesn't seem like it's a smart idea even sometimes. Even though there's some part of you that's screaming, no! Okay, I'm kind of thinking of my childhood. Have you ever sat in a little red wagon at the top of a long slope? And you sat there and you thought, I may die. Maybe you probably didn't even think that. That was my problem. I never had that thought. The only thought I had was, I have got to do this. I cannot not ride this wagon down this hill. You know, it's interesting, as my son Wesley discovered that you can ride a wagon downhill. I don't know who showed him that. But in my defense, I showed him in the front yard. Okay, now we live on a hill, okay? Hill comes front, and then there's the house, and then there's front, like that. It's all grassy and nice in the front, all right? And you just didn't get a whole lot of speed. And when I showed him, the wheels sunk into the soil, so I didn't really get any speed going. Now, but before I knew it, I look out the back, and he is up at the top. Actually, he was already screaming down the hill at the back. The back part here, it's steeper, and there's no grass. It's just rocks and dirt coming down here. But he goes screaming down there with a huge grin on his face. So apparently he had one of those cannot not moments as he sat in that wagon at the top of the hill. A cannot not is one of those, it's something that you feel like you must do. Now, if you've ever asked someone to marry you, I bet you had this moment, right? You came to the place where you said, I cannot not ask this person to marry me. I hope that's where you came to. You know, big decisions. Times where you put it out there. You decided to go or do or say, even though. So a cannot not is something that no matter the cost, no matter the risk, you feel as if you cannot not do it. Now, some of you might experience this when you're shopping, right? You stand there, you've tried something on maybe, you're standing there looking at this thing, and ladies, I know you think I'm picking on you, but all right, gentlemen, you're sitting there looking at a shotgun, okay? And there's these voices in you that are going, no, I can't afford it, I don't need it, all these different things. But you come to this moment where you cannot not. And so you buy it. Basically, when it boils down to it, a cannot not is when the value of doing outweighs the risk involved, right? I always say, I never had enough fear for my own good. And so as a kid, I took a lot of risk. And people would look at it and go, why in the world did you do that? Well, you know, I wasn't thinking about the risk. The value of doing, of screaming down that hill in a little wagon, the value and the fun factor that I thought I was going to have way outweighed. Really, there was not even out of context most of the time, right? The danger, what danger? I'm invincible, as we all thought at some point. But, all right, let's flip over from life, wagons, shopping, all of that kind of stuff. Let's flip over into the faith category. When you have a cannot not of faith, when you indeed feel, and this having to do with your faith, there is something that you feel like you absolutely must do. Do you have that in your life right now? Have you ever come to that place in your faith journey? There is something that no matter the cost, no matter the risk, you feel as if you cannot not do it. I know for me, my salvation experience was a lot like this. I was at a place, and in that moment at Southside Assembly of God, when God convicted me of my sin and spoke to me and said, "It is true. What you know is true." It became a moment where I could not put my faith in Jesus because He died for me. But since then, there have been bunches of times where I could not do something. It may be speaking to someone. It may be preaching a particular sermon. It may be going on a trip, going into somewhere, there's all sorts of cannot nots of faith where eventually the value of doing outweighed the risk involved in doing that thing. Today I want us to look at two stories that might be familiar to you. But in both of these stories, these characters, the people came to a place where they could not do this thing. First one I want us to talk about is Moses. The backstory of Moses is he was an Israelite who was born at a time where it wasn't safe for Israelite babies to be born. And so his mom hid him in a basket. He ends up getting found by Pharaoh's daughter. He ends up being raised in Pharaoh's household. He goes on to eventually murder an Egyptian and run away. And he ran away and he made a new life. He ended up getting married. Jethro became his father-in-law. And at this point in his life, he was happily married. He was watching the sheep. And he didn't have a care in the world. Here's where we pick up the story. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There an angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, Here I am. Do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the place you are standing is holy ground. Then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. At this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. The Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them cry out because of their slave drivers. I am concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of the land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the home of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, the termites. And now the cry of the Israelites has reached me, and I have seen the way of the Egyptians. The way the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now go. I'm sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. Now eventually, this is exactly what Moses did. He went to Pharaoh. And there's a lot of story there. Now the interesting thing, and I hope you will go and read this in Exodus chapter 3. This didn't immediately qualify as a cannot not in Moses' mind, right? In fact, he argued with God and he made quite a few excuses on the reasons why this was not a good idea. But eventually, the value of doing what God had asked him to do was raised higher than the risk involved in doing what God had asked him to do. Another instance of this you find in the book of Acts. And by the way, there are bunches of these where you can find where people came to this place where an action became a cannot not. They came to that place where they could not do what God was asking them to do. This is in Acts chapter 5. The apostles performed many signs and wonders among the people, and all the believers used to meet together in Solomon's colonnade. So no one else dared join them, even though they were highly regarded by the people. Nevertheless, more and more men and women believed in the Lord and were added to their number. As a result, people brought the sick into the streets and laid them on beds and mats, so that at least Peter's shadow might fall on some of them as he passed by. Crowds gathered also from towns around Jerusalem, bringing their sick and those tormented by impure spirits, and all of them were healed. Then the high priest and all of his associates, who were the members of the party of the Sadducees, were filled with jealousy. If you continue reading here, they arrested the apostles and put them into public jail. But during the night, an angel of the Lord opened the doors of the jail and brought them out. Go stand in the temple courts and tell the people all about this new life. Now, you've just been thrown in jail. The jails weren't pleasant places, they say. There were even times where we're told the apostles were not only just thrown in jail, but they were beaten and thrown in jail. And you continue to read this story, you'll find that they were released, and then later they were like, hey, where are those guys we put in jail? Oh, they're gone. What? Where are they? They're actually back in the temple courts, doing the same thing they were arrested for. So finally they go and get them again. And having brought the apostles, they made them appear before the Sanhedrin to be questioned by the high priest. We gave you strict orders not to teach in this name. Yet you have filled Jerusalem with your teaching and are determined to make us guilty of this man's blood. Jesus. The Sanhedrin turned him over to the Romans. Peter and the other apostles replied, we must obey God rather than men. You know, when it comes to cannot nots of faith, this is kind of the bottom line here. When the value of doing this thing, because you believe you're obeying God, because God has said, I want you to do this. You remember the angel, when he was letting them out, said, go and tell the people about this new life. They could not. So even though it might mean they get arrested, it might mean they get beaten, they could not. So let's talk about these things. And I know some of you, it's just grating upon your grammar chalkboard, right? When I say cannot not. But that's what it is. It's a cannot not of faith. It's an imperative. But how do they come? Well, let's think for a second. First off, sometimes they come through a burning bush. Now, that has never personally happened to me. Anybody else? Burning bush? Anybody? No. But God does it so many different ways for so many different people. That was Moses' time, his way. Sometimes, just as we saw, an angel let them out of the jail and told them what to do. And they did it. Sometimes it is an angel. It's through dreams. It's through visions. Sometimes it could be an angel of God coming to you and saying, here's what I want you to do. In the Christmas story, we saw that sometimes an angel appeared to somebody. Other times, in Joseph's case, the angel appeared to him in a dream. Sometimes it's the words of Jesus. Sometimes it might come through you and to you in a song when you're driving down the road, and somehow the words of Jesus just pierce into your heart. And suddenly the value of doing that thing suddenly becomes so much more important than the risk and the cost and anything else. You find yourself saying, I cannot not do this thing. So many times it might come from reading the Bible. It could come through one of these characters that we've talked about. You're reading their story and you realize there's something that God is asking you to do. There are so many places where the words of Jesus, the words written in red in so many of our Bibles, when you're reading those words, they will speak to you just as if He said it to you personally. And suddenly you find yourself in this situation where you can no longer sit by. You can no longer go about your day or your life without doing this thing. You know, it comes down to this. Did y'all say that word? Listening. Are you listening? However God wants to reveal it to you, whenever He wants to reveal it to you, are you willing to listen for that voice of God? It gets so easy in our life to go and do and listen and watch and do all these kind of things, and everything's just going, and we never walk through. Or do you? Maybe you're sensitive enough. You've come to that place in your faith where you want to hear. Folks, that's where I want us to all get to where we walk through our day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, all the way through the week, not just this time, but all the way through the week. We're listening for God to say, hey, I need you to do this. I think about Allie Mellon. She grew up in this church. She went on mission trips with the youth group in this church. She went over into the mission field in various places. She started an orphanage in India. All kind of stuff. But she found herself at a crossroads once again. She said she happened to be in a hotel, I believe it was, and she turned on the television and there was a movie about sex trafficking. And she sat and watched in horror. And just something clicked. Suddenly she heard God's voice say, I want you to work in this. It became I cannot not do something to help. And so now she's in Cambodia, in one of the truly hardest places on the planet, doing this work. And we look at her, we listen to her, and we go, how in the world? And then she looks at us and says, how can you not? You'll find people doing amazing things, and you'll know they got a cannot not moment, because they'll look at you and say, help me. How can you not? How can you not be a part of this? It has become the most important thing, because they had a cannot not moment. So how do we, when we're listening, how can we know? What's it going to be like? And it's a scary thing to really put yourself out there and say, God, what is it you want of me? What passion are you going to plant in me? Well, here's what we can say, that I guarantee it will always reflect the heart of God. When Abby got her cannot not moment, it is a very clear reflection of the heart of God that He wants to save those children. Not only their salvation, their soul, but to save those children out of the slavery that they are in. That is the heart of God. We know the heart of God when we read what Jesus taught. He taught us to go and tell, to serve and to give and to love and to help. You say, well, how can I know that it is God really asking? Well, if it's one of these things, there's a pretty good chance. That's God poking His heart into your heart. Into where suddenly your heart gets transformed. And things that used to matter don't matter anymore because there's something bigger. You have a cannot not in your heart. It's when the value of doing outweighs risk, outweighs every other thought, the value of doing it. You say, well, how do things get, the value of something like that get raised? Well, because of who God is, there are certain things that are just more important. Because of His love for us, because He died for us, because of His love for other people, because He died for them. I mean, you can just take your pick, all of those put together. There are certain things in this life that are of more value than others. There are certain things in life that mean something. Certain things in life that have an eternal value. These are the things that are on God's heart. So here's the question we're going to end with, a couple of questions. What are your cannot nots? What are the things that God has been calling you to, and you've kind of been pushing it away maybe? Or maybe you're already engaged in it. What are those things that hurt your heart when you hear about them happening? What is the thing that you cannot stand by and allow to happen without trying to help? What is that thing that just breaks your heart? What is that thing that is not being done that you feel has to be done? You feel like this thing needs to be being done, and since it's not getting done, I'm going to be a part of it. I'm going to do what I can to make sure that this gets done. I guess the final thing is this. Are you listening? Are you listening for when God is calling you? I would love it if we could all walk out of here with a cannot not in our heart. Something where you walk out of here and say, I really have to be doing that.